Hello, my name is Adriana Alfaro, and today I will be discussing Wat Tyler's Rebellion. Before discussing the main points of the rebellion itself, I found it important to address key figures in the events leading up to the rebellion. Starting with the leader, I wanted to provide background information about Wat Tyler and why he might have been the type to lead a rebellion. Firstly, there is little known about Tyler's early life. There is speculation as to when exactly he was born. Some historians suggest 1341, while others suggest the 1320s. According to my research, the 1341 date seems to be applied more often. His place of origin is also up for speculation, but some sources suggest that he is originally from Colchester. It is a common suggestion that he was a follower of John Ball. In addition, I found some information about the origins of his name. Wat could be a derivative of Walter, and Tyler might have to do with his family's occupation, that is, being tilers, or people that worked with tile. Following Wat Tyler, I wanted to provide some information about John Ball, who is said to have, as I mentioned previously, influenced Wat Tyler. John Ball was a priest who believed in social equality. He is known to have delivered sermons that aligned with his views. He, too, was a key participant in the events that occurred in the Peasants' Revolt, and he was often thought to have very radical sermons. John Ball's name is often and commonly associated with John Wycliffe, who was a philosopher and a priest at the time, and who also had ideas rooted in social equality. His name is also commonly associated with the Lollard movement, which was a movement that opposed practices within the Catholic Church and was often thought to have a very radical emphasis. The political and social climate of England at the time played a very important role in leading up to the rebellion. There was extreme upset among the peasants with the English crown, as peasants often felt very suppressed and abused by the social structure or system in place. In addition to their upset, England was struggling with a number of issues. One of these issues was the Black Plague that stretched from the years 1346 to 1352. This proved to be devastating to the population, wiping out about a third of the people. This extreme reduction in population resulted in more issues such as extreme lack of manpower and economic disruptions. Another large factor that caused the upset was the 100 Years' War between England and France, as a lot of the funds were being poured into and lost to the war. King Richard II played a large role in sparking greater unrest among the peasants. In 1379, he asked Parliament for assistance with increasing funds for the war. The need for money called for an increase in taxes, and thus a poll tax was imposed. This one being what is called a graduated tax. This kind of tax meant that those who were richer would be taxed more. For example, bishops were charged 80 shillings, while peasants were charged 4d. This tax, although it sparked slight frustration, was still not completely opposed, as the tax was appropriately distributed among the different classes. Simon Sadbury arguably played a larger role in sparking enough unrest that led to the rebellion. The funds collected from the poll tax in 1379 were quickly lost to the war, and other things such as corruption. Thus, there was still a great need for funds following that collection. Therefore, Sadbury, the Archbishop of Canterbury, suggested a brand new tax. This tax did not take different classes into account, but rather charged anyone older than 15 years of age 1 shilling. This was considered extremely unjust, as peasants were paying the same amount as nobles. For many, earning a shilling would take a week's worth of work. Additionally, many peasants felt that they were not seeing the benefits of paying these high taxes, and often faced issues like French raiders. Wat Tyler was at his final straw when he heard news of a 14-year-old girl who was allegedly sexually assaulted by a tax collector. Upon hearing the news, he is said to have rushed to the site and bashed the tax collector on the head, killing him. From there, he chose to flee, knowing that he would be persecuted. Throughout that time, he participated in a number of tax revolts, and stuck in Rochester, where a number of rebels were collected. From there, he became the leader of the 1381 Peasant Revolt. This revolt is also known as the 1381 Peasant Rebellion, or, like the title suggests, the Wat Tyler Rebellion. It is said that he was put into this position as a leader as he was regarded as an individual with great leadership skills and had the ability to control a crowd. He was also known to have military schools, as it is speculated that he fought in the 100 Years' War. To start the rebellion, they first marched to Maidstone, where they freed John Ball, who had been imprisoned. Upon his release, he began to deliver speeches or sermons. The rebels found it important to have a religious figure at the head. They considered themselves to be Catholics of good nature, and having a religious figure at the head would suggest that they were being led by the word of God. Following the march, there was a revolt at Dartford. Then, the peasants proceeded to seize the Rochester Castle, and following that, they arrived in Canterbury on June 10th. Here, the rebels took it a step further and seized the Archbishop's castle, freed prisoners, and destroyed things like legal documents. Additionally, they destroyed private property and broke into manors. Their final stop was in London, where they were determined to meet with the king. Roughly 30,000 peasants marched on London. The king gave orders to lock the peasants out of London, but those who sympathized with them ensured that the gates would stay open for their entrance. Some people of London also chose to participate, and they began to destroy more property. Higher-ups opposed the king's meeting with the peasants, while others were in favor. The king decided to entertain them, and they met for the very first time at Mile End. This is where Tyler presented their demands: the ending of all feudal services, the ability to participate in trade, buying and selling, pardon for all the offenses committed during the rebellion, and a rent limit of 4d per acre, in addition to an end to feudal fines. While negotiating was in place, peasants were marching on the Tower of London. There, soldiers were guarding the tower, but they let the peasants go ahead. There, they seized Simon Sadbury, Robert Hales, and John Legge, and executed them. As I mentioned previously, Simon Sudbury was the Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Hales was the king's treasurer, and John Legge was the tax commissioner. Another meeting was agreed upon, where Tyler made more demands. These demands included the termination of the lordship system, the redistribution of the church's wealth to the peasants, lessening the amount of bishops, and the termination of the role of villeins entirely. Richard agreed to his demands, but much like their first meeting, Wat was unsatisfied and unconvinced by his response. It is reported that Wat allegedly asked for a drink of water so that he could rinse out his mouth. This action in the presence of the king was considered disrespectful. This action, in addition to the fact that he chose not to remove his hood in the presence of the king, had spectators appalled. From there, one of the spectators that was associated with Richard allegedly proceeded to state that Wat was the greatest thief and robber in Kent. This deeply angered Tyler, as the statement directly opposed what he had stated about his party in a previous speech he had delivered. This angered him so much that he felt the need to act out, and he allegedly wanted to stab the valet with the dagger he had on hand, and allegedly made an attempt to do so. The attempt gave reason for him to be arrested, as he tried a violent attack directly in front of the king. The mayor, who was present at the meeting, then made an attempt to arrest Tyler. This only aggravated him even more, and thus he lashed out, stabbing the mayor while he was trying to arrest him. Much to Tyler's misfortune, the mayor was wearing armor and thus took no damage. The mayor reacted violently, attacking Wat and slashing him in the neck and delivering a throw to his head. More began to join the mayor in his attack, as the valet proceeded to grab his sword and reportedly stabbed Wat 2 to 3 more times. Wat was then transported from their location to a doctor, and he was kept there. Shortly after, the mayor had him carried to Smithfield, where he was put to death and thus beheaded, right in front of his followers. After seeing his death, his followers began to show signs of continuing their aggression. They raised their weapons in direct response to the kill, threatening to continue fighting. In his best attempt to stop the violence, the king rode over and reportedly stated, "Will you shoot your king? I will be your chief and captain. You shall have from me that which you seek," thus promising them everything that they had been fighting for. This quickly put a stop to the aggression of the peasants. They then spoke, and negotiations were made, with the final decision being that the peasants would return back to where they came from, putting an end to the peasant revolt. Here, I have included all of my sources that I used while conducting my research and making this presentation. Finally, thank you very much for listening, and have a nice day.